Charles Spurgeon, in one of his sermons, says that man is a suicide. Why? Because I must have escaped 1,000 diseases, but death has a quiver that will reach my heart at last. Every man born must die. But this most unavoidable and inevitable reality of life is not talked about often. We all pretend like the uninvited guest does not even exist. So today, let's talk about the grim reality of our lives. Hello and welcome to the Arpana Saladi podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. We get ready for a lot of things, right? We get ready for interviews, weddings, to go out on a vacation, so many other things. But if we ever try asking ourselves this question, are you ready to go? Are you ready to leave? Are you ready to die? Are you prepared to die? Death for an unbeliever, a person who does not have Jesus, is completely different. It's scary. It's uncertain. We all know about Alexander the Great, who became one of the biggest rulers of ancient history. He conquered most of the world of that time just at the age of 32. Although being the king of ancient Macedonia for less than 13 years, he changed the course of history, and that's why he's called Alexander the Great. He was one of the greatest military generals who stretched his empire all the way from India through Egypt to the northern borders of Greece. He was taught by one of the greatest philosophers of all time. I know, you all know that, Aristotle. Now, this might have helped him have fundamental traits of ambitious commander and a successful leader, but Alexander the Great, while he was heading back home after he conquering kingdoms, he fell seriously ill. We know this, but once again, it's just a reminder for ourselves. Alexander the Great, while he fell seriously ill and while lying on his deathbed, he realized that nothing was worth it, even after living a successful life, conquering most of the known world. And Alexander the Great, he called his royal generals and he told him about the 3 wishes that we all know. He said, I will depart from this world soon and I have 3 wishes. Please carry them out without fail. And the king said, my physicians must carry my body, and I want the path leading to my grave to be strewn with gold, silver, precious stones that are in my treasury while my body is being carried to be buried. And the 3rd request was that both my hands should be kept dangling out of my coffin. The generals were wondering what this request meant. So one of them kissed his hand and asked, My Majesty, we promise you that all your wishes will be fulfilled. But will you tell us, why do you have such strange wishes? We know Alexander's reply, right? He said, I want my physicians to carry my body alone because I want people to know that no doctor can cure people's illness, especially when they face death. So don't let people take life for granted. And the second one, he said, all this that I have acquired for myself, not even a fraction of gold, will come with me when I leave this earth. And the third one, he said, I want my hands to be dangling out of my coffin because I came empty-handed into this world and I will go empty-handed. And the king's last words were, when you bury my body, don't build any monument, but keep my hands outside so that the world knows that the person who won the whole world had nothing in his hands while dying. Now, these were the words of Alexander the Great. Now, he might think that he has won the whole world. That is, maybe in basis of the kingdoms he has conquered. But for a Christian, the reality of death is completely different. Now, in the sermon that I've heard by Charles Spurgeon, which is titled, Are You Prepared to Die? He says, if death comes to me as a stranger, I may be startled. We see that there is so much of uncertainty for people who are outside of Christ. You know, when we usually go to somebody who has lost their loved ones, they might be our friends, our colleagues, but somebody who is not a Christian, we see that there is so much of sorrow, sadness, sickness, no joy, and there is so much of a feeling that, you know, we don't know where this person is gone, and people usually say rest in peace, or people usually say gone too soon, and so many other things like that. But from the sermon that I've heard, by Charles Spurgeon, which is titled, Are You Prepared to Die? Spurgeon says that if death comes to me as a stranger, I may be startled, but I have prepared myself to receive him. He may come and knock at my door, and I shall say, I am ready to go with you, for I have been expecting you all my life. How beautiful this expression of the epistle. I am ready to be offered up, and the time of my departure is at hand. He was waiting for death, Spurgeon says, as for a friend, and when it came, I'm sure, he was well pleased to go. He tells us he had a desire to depart and to be with Christ, which is far better. Even so, may we learn to look at the time when we shall hear the summons, come up higher, as to a time to be longed for rather than dreaded. Now, I'm not saying that we need to stop living our lives and be in anticipation of death, stop doing what we are doing and think about when I am going to die. No, we see all over the Bible, all these people, all the saints, they have lived in the reality that one day we are soon going to pass away from this earth. And they were ever ready to face death, not with uncertainty, but with certainty. And Spurgeon goes on to say that you have a right, Christian, to expect that as other Christians die, you shall also die. How will you die? Why? You will die as your sainted mother died. You will die as your father did when the time came for the silver cord to be loosed and the golden bowl to be broken, for the pitcher to be broken at the fountain and the wheel broken at the cistern. The pitcher was broken and the cord loosed, and their spirits went to God. But for us Christians, you know something? Spurgeon goes on to say that we don't have to fear death because God said not just after death, but He promised us through His word that even while we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we will fear no evil because God will be with us. Because He has already swallowed up death in victory. Because God has promised us, fear not, I am with you, be not dismayed, I am your God, I will never leave you nor forsake you. If God shall keep His promises, as we all know that He will, do we need to fear anything? And he goes on to write, and he says that we will all be like a man who does a long day's walk, and finally when he can see home, he will clap his hands. He will sit down upon the next milestone with tears in his eyes, wipe the sweat off his face, and says, it is well, it is well, it is over. Oh, how happy it is to see my own roof tree and the place where my best friends, my kindred dwell. I shall soon be at home forever with the Lord. While we are on this earth, there are 3 things that will help us be prepared for our death. Number 1, to know that life is very, very, very frail. We know that so many scripture passages from the Bible, right? Our life is like a vapor, it's like a bubble, it's like a flower. It's here today and it's gone tomorrow. There are so many other metaphors which describe our life to be so frail and so fragile. Now, if we live our lives in the light of this truth, I think all the early church martyrs, all the epistles, everybody, they lived their life in the light of this truth, and that is why they did not hold their lives so dear to them, because they knew that life was just a vapor, life was just so frail. And in Jesus' words, he says, whoever wants to gain his life will lose it. So we need to remember that life is so frail and fragile, and we are going to be here today and we are not going to be here tomorrow. We do not even know what the next minute holds. We do not even know what the next second holds. We cannot even dare to peep through the curtain and see through the curtain of tomorrow, right? It is so uncertain. It is so fragile. It is so frail. We know not our times. That is why even the psalmists have written so many psalms and they've said, Lord, teach us to number our days, because we do not know our lives, how frail they are. When we live our lives in the light of this truth, I think we will change our perspective towards things and towards life. Number 2, we need to remember that the earth that we are living on is very, very temporary. This will help us with our attachment to materialistic things, our name, our prejudice, our pride. Everything is just going to vanish away. Sometimes we as Christians also get lost and get caught up with this rat race of the world, right? about all these materialistic things, buying a house, investing somewhere, and doing this, doing that. I'm not saying that all that is wrong. All that is good. That is right. We need to live our lives as God has ordained it to be. But we always need to have this truth as the anchor at the back of our mind, that whatever we are doing, we need to glorify God, and we need to remember that every materialistic thing that is here right now with me is nothing that I can hold dear to myself. When we look at life in this way, I'm sure life is definitely going to make sense. Our perspective towards life, our perspective towards relationships, the way we deal with people, the way we deal with situations, everything is going to change, because we will remember that everything on this earth is temporary. That is why Apostle Paul, because he was able to grasp this truth, it was very easy for him to say that let us fix our eyes on God. Let us fix our eyes on the things above. Let us fix our eyes on Jesus. Because those things are eternal and these things are temporary. So in contrast, which one do we want? Obviously, the things which are above. Number 3, our time is very limited to make an impact on this world. We hear a lot of people say, right, our time is very limited. People in the world might say, I just have very few days left. So I want to, go and fulfill all my bucket list, and I want to fulfill all my wishes. I want to live as I like. If somebody want to indulge themselves into something, they'll be like, okay, I'm soon going to die, so I want to do everything that I ever wanted to do. But for a Christian, while the time is still available, let us live a holy life, because after we die, we cannot live. Like the psalmist said, Lord, if I die, who is going to praise you? So as long as I live, I'm going to praise you. So as long as we are living, let us live lives which will impact people. Let us live lives which will witness and show Christ through our words, through our deeds, through our life, especially in our own family, because family is the primary place where our testimony will be tested, right? Because we might go and make big claims outside, but people who are watching us very closely, our spouse or our children or our parents, our grandparents, or, your friends, whoever is at very close proximity with you, what they say is what actually matters. And they should be able to testify that this child of God, she was able to live a life worthy of her calling. He was able to live a life which was able to portray Jesus as his Lord and his Savior. Let's not gamble our eternal destiny, wasting our time here on earth. Because 5 minutes after we die, we know that we are going to be in heaven because we are saved. But will we be there with regrets that we have wasted our time? We couldn't live as much. We couldn't read the Bible as much. We couldn't spend time on eternal things as much. We couldn't invest ourselves into working for the Lord so much for all that he has done for us. How is our reaction going to be? I want to read this poem in the end and close it. Dear Christian, it's only while we are on earth that we have time to prepare for our eternal departure, to be in heaven. Heaven is all that the all-beneficent loving heart of God would desire for us. Heaven is all that the omniscient mind of God could design for us. Heaven is all that the omnipotent hand of God can prepare for us. Heaven is a perfect place. But our time on earth will determine our place in heaven. Now, it is not that by our merit that we are going to enter into heaven, but like the epistles wrote, for all that Christ has done for us, how are we living our lives on this earth? Dear Christian, we do not have to look forward to death with any fear or with any dread, because we are not going to an uncertain place, but we are going home. So may I ask you this question today? Are you prepared to die, or do you think the earth is permanent? I will see you all in the next podcast. Thank you so much for listening. You were listening to Arpana Saladi.